Most men would rather die than face 30 days alone with their own thoughts. And this terrifying truth reveals something catastrophic about the state of modern masculinity that explains why so many men feel empty, directionless, and desperately dependent on external validation for their sense of worth and identity. What I am about to explain will disturb you, because it exposes how deeply the fear of solitude has corrupted masculine development, and why the inability to be alone with yourself is the root cause of almost every other weakness that plagues men in contemporary society. But understanding this principle and learning to conquer your own fear of isolation could be the key to unlocking authentic strength, unshakable confidence, and genuine self-respect that cannot be taken away by external circumstances or other people's opinions. The terror of solitude that most men experience is not natural or inevitable. It is a learned response created by decades of constant stimulation, social buffering, and dependence on external sources for entertainment, validation, and emotional regulation. Modern men have become addicted to noise, distraction, and social interaction, not because these things provide genuine value, but because they prevent the uncomfortable confrontation with their own thoughts, feelings, and the reality of who they have become beneath all the roles they play for others. When you remove all the distractions and social buffers that most men use to avoid facing themselves, what remains is often so weak and underdeveloped that the experience becomes unbearable within hours or days rather than weeks or months. This is why most men cannot sit quietly in a room for even 15 minutes without reaching for their phone, turning on entertainment, or finding some excuse to engage with other people, rather than simply being present with their own thoughts and feelings. But here is what makes this terror so destructive. The inability to be alone with yourself means you cannot truly know yourself, which makes it impossible to develop genuine confidence, authentic relationships, or meaningful life direction. When you are constantly seeking external stimulation and validation, you never develop internal resources or self-knowledge, which leaves you psychologically dependent on others for your sense of identity and worth. This dependence makes you weak, manipulable, and unable to make difficult decisions or take unpopular stands when circumstances require genuine courage and character. Let me explain exactly why solitude is so terrifying for modern men, and how conquering this fear transforms every aspect of your life and relationships. The first reason men avoid solitude is that it forces them to confront the gap between who they pretend to be in social situations and who they actually are when no one is watching or judging their performance. Most men have spent years carefully crafting public personas that hide their insecurities, weaknesses, and authentic thoughts and feelings from others, and often from themselves as well. Social interaction allows them to maintain these personas through constant performance and image management. But solitude strips away all the pretense and forces them to face the reality of their actual character, capabilities, and life choices without any social buffering or external validation to soften the confrontation. This can be devastating for men who discover that they have been living according to other people's expectations rather than their own values, or that they have been avoiding challenges and responsibilities that would have developed genuine strength and competence. The second reason is that solitude reveals how dependent they have become on external sources for their emotional regulation, entertainment, and sense of purpose. When you remove social interaction, entertainment consumption, and constant stimulation, many men discover that they have no internal resources for managing their emotions, occupying their time productively, or finding meaning and satisfaction in their daily experience. They realize that they have been using other people, activities, and distractions as emotional crutches that prevent them from developing genuine self-reliance and internal strength. This recognition can be terrifying because it reveals the extent to which they have become psychological children who need constant external support and validation, rather than self-sufficient adults who can function independently and contribute value to others. The third reason is that extended solitude forces men to confront unresolved emotions, unexamined beliefs, and uncomfortable truths about their lives that they have been avoiding through constant activity and social distraction. When you cannot escape into entertainment or social interaction, you are forced to process feelings of regret, disappointment, fear, and grief that you may have been pushing down for years or decades. You must examine beliefs about yourself and the world that you may have adopted without conscious evaluation, and that may be limiting your potential or preventing you from making decisions that align with your authentic values and objectives. This emotional and psychological work is essential for developing genuine maturity and strength, but it is also uncomfortable and sometimes painful, which is why most men avoid it by staying constantly busy and socially engaged, rather than creating space for serious self-examination and internal development. But here is what men who conquer their fear of solitude discover. Being alone with yourself is not punishment or deprivation. It is the foundation of all genuine strength, confidence, and capability. When you can be comfortable with your own thoughts and emotions without needing external distraction or validation, you develop an unshakable sense of self that cannot be manipulated or controlled by others. When you have faced your own weaknesses and limitations honestly, you can begin developing real strengths rather than just performing confidence to hide your insecurities. When you have learned to find meaning and satisfaction through internal resources rather than external stimulation, you become psychologically independent and emotionally stable in ways that allow you to contribute value to others rather than constantly extracting validation and support from your relationships and social interactions. The practice of extended solitude also reveals capabilities and interests that you never knew existed because they were buried under years of social conditioning and constant external input. Many men discover creative abilities, intellectual interests, or spiritual inclinations that they never had space to explore while living their distracted, socially focused lives. They develop hobbies and skills that provide genuine satisfaction rather than just temporary entertainment. They clarify their values and priorities through careful examination rather than just adopting whatever seems socially acceptable or expected. And they begin making life decisions based on their own authentic assessment of what will provide long-term fulfillment rather than short-term social approval. So how do you begin conquering your own fear of solitude and developing the internal strength that comes from being comfortable with yourself? Start with small periods of deliberate isolation. Even 30 minutes without any external stimulation or social contact can be challenging for men who have become addicted to constant input and interaction. Practice sitting quietly without entertainment, social media, books, or any other distraction, and notice what thoughts and feelings arise when you cannot escape into external activities. Gradually extend these periods of solitude until you can comfortably spend several hours alone with your own thoughts without becoming anxious, bored, or desperate for external stimulation. Use longer periods of isolation for serious self-examination. Reflect on your values, goals, and life choices without the influence of other people's opinions or social pressure. Consider what you actually want from your life versus what others expect from you, and begin making decisions based on your own authentic assessment rather than external approval. And most importantly, understand that learning to be alone with yourself is not about becoming antisocial or withdrawn. It is about developing the internal foundation that allows you to engage with others from a position of strength rather than neediness, authenticity rather than performance, and contribution rather than extraction. If you are ready to stop running from yourself and start developing the kind of internal strength that cannot be taken away by external circumstances, follow this channel and turn on notifications. The journey inward is the most challenging and most rewarding adventure you will ever undertake, and it is absolutely essential for any man who wants to